Let's break down 3 wide receivers and 3 running backs that are sneaky starts moving into week 8 of the 2024 fantasy football season. These players may be out there on the waiver wire. They may be out there on your bench, but overall, due to matchups and maybe new opportunities, they have some sneaky upside as we approach the week. Let's kick the video off with Cedric Tillman of the Cleveland Browns. Has been kind of a popular sleeper waiver wire addition moving into the week after he had 18.1 fantasy points in week 7 against the Bengals, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 81 receiving yards, with the combination of Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback as well as Jameis Winston. But here in week 8, we know now that Jameis Winston's going to be the starting quarterback, and Jameis has his flaws. The last time we saw him in a full game of action was week 10 against Minnesota last week. He was 13-25, 122 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. So Jameis threw a touchdown this past week. We'll see what we get this week. It's a good matchup, though, as the Ravens are allowing the 32nd most fantasy points to the wide receiver position so far on the season, which is the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position so far on the season. They've given up, a lot of points overall. I mean, you look past to this last week, right, on Monday Night Football, although they were dominating the Bucks, they still were giving up points to the very end of that game. So listen, it's a little bit risky because we don't know exactly what we're going to get out of the Browns this week, but I think that said, Tillman's in a really nice spot. He's out there on the waiver wire. You want to add somebody last minute to plug in as a risky flex with some nice upside. Cedric Tillman against the Ravens this week is your guy. And speaking of the Ravens and Bucks last week, let's talk about Jalen McMillan, rookie wide receiver who's going to see plenty of opportunity with Mike Evans suffering that hamstring injury and Chris Godwin now out for the season. Huge bummer, but somebody's got to step up here. I think that the running backs are going to be heavily involved. Cade Otton's going to be heavily involved. But then we've got Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, and Sterling Shepard. Could really go any way here at the wide receiver position, but Jalen McMillan has already been kind of playing a similar role to Chris Godwin in this offense when he's been given opportunities. Scored a touchdown in week 1, and outside of that, we haven't really seen a ton of involvement out of McMillan, but he had 8 targets this past week against the Ravens, while Sterling Shepard had just 1 target, and Trey Palmer had 3 targets. So I think he's going to get opportunity here in a good matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, giving up the 21st most fantasy points to the wide receiver position so far on the season. There are tougher days ahead for McMillan, like week 9 against the Chiefs, and fortunately, Mike Evans should be back after week 11, but even when Evans is back, somebody's got to fill in that role of Chris Godwin, and I do think it's going to be Jalen McMillan, so he could be worth rostering moving forward, and he has shot up to 48% rostered overall. So if you need somebody this week, he could still be out there. I think he could fill in nicely against the Falcons. The last time we saw the Bucks and Falcons play, we saw a ton of points scored, a ton of offense. Don't know if that's exactly going to happen this week, but overall, McMillan should be a nice last-minute plug-in with some nice upside as we approach week 8. All right, another rookie wide receiver that I've had my eyes on is Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos, who finished with double digits in week 7 against the Saints with 10 fantasy points, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 50 receiving yards. In week 6, 11.6 fantasy points, 3 targets, 2 receptions, 31 receiving yards and a touchdown. And although in week 5 against the Raiders, he had a total of just 3 fantasy points, he also dropped a long touchdown from Bo Nix that he should have caught. I mean, this has been the whole thing with Troy Franklin this year that's been interesting, is this is Bo Nix's college teammate at the wide receiver position. It's taken a little bit of time, but we're starting to see that chemistry from college start to bleed over into the NFL between Franklin and Nix. So listen, I think overall it's just a great matchup this week against the Carolina Panthers, coming in 22nd against the wide receiver position. And I've been talking about Franklin for a couple weeks now because Bo Nix continues to look just slightly better and better as each week goes on. And he's a quarterback himself who I think is a sneaky start this week against the Panthers, but is also going to be a quarterback in fantasy football that we can spot play at times. And you go back and look at what he's done over the past couple weeks, 19 or more fantasy points every week since week 3 outside of 2 games. And I think Bo Nix is going to continue to be a part of this offense. And while we can spot play Bo Nix at the quarterback position, I think Franklin in good matchups, like this week against the Panthers, next week against the Ravens, maybe week 11 against the Falcons, week 12 against the Raiders, is going to have moments where he pops up as an option in terms of a flex play. So the ceiling might not be super high here, but if you need someone to plug in, he sits at 12% rostered. I think that kind of 10, 11, 12 point range is certainly doable for Troy Franklin in week 8. And I love Troy Franklin's current line on Underdog, sitting at just 28.5 total receiving yards. He has smashed that in the past 2 weeks, and he would have hit that against the Raiders if he hadn't dropped that touchdown pass as well. I think he's going to be involved in this game. It's a smash matchup. I would head straight to Underdog, take the over on Troy Franklin's receiving yards. I think this is a sneaky line for the week. And don't forget, all new users who sign up with promo code TheCatch get a free NFL Pick Em to use towards week 8's action. Take your free Pick Em, pair it with Troy Franklin's receiving yard total, automatically triple your cash entry when that line hits. And on top of that, Underdog is giving all new users who sign up with promo code TheCatch a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. So that's a free NFL Pick'em and up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you sign up with promo code TheCatch. That link is down below. And let's stick with the same team. Let's take a look at Javonte Williams, who I think a lot of you guys are going to say, yeah, if I own Javonte, I'm going to start him. But we see all kinds of rosters here on the channel, and I can tell you guys for sure there are plenty of rosters out there where Javonte Williams is your RB3, RB4. He's at the end of your depth chart, and he's coming off of a huge game. 26.1 fantasy points against an awful Saints run defense, 88 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 3 catches for 23 receiving yards, 6.29 yards per carry, 11.1 fantasy points per game so far on the season for Javonte, and he has the best possible matchup you could ask for against the Carolina Panthers this week, giving up the most fantasy points to the running back position. Bryce Young is going to start at quarterback while Andy Dalton is injured. This is a home game for the Broncos. They're going to play defense. They're going to impose their will in the run game. They're going to score points against arguably the worst defense in the entire NFL overall. Javonte is set for a huge week. If he's on your roster, he is not on your bench this week. You can flex Javonte Williams. You can play him as an RB2. But overall, we want to start running backs that face the Panthers, and we want to start Javonte Williams here in week 8. He has plenty of sneaky upside. Next up, we got Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys, who once again is a running back that a lot of you guys might be playing right now, but certainly is also a running back that for a lot of you guys is going to sit as like an RB3 or 4 at the bottom of your depth chart. But the week 7 bye kind of leaves that weird taste in your mouth, like, he hasn't done anything in a while because it's been one whole week that he hasn't gotten to play, right? But Dowdle's been very good in his last 3 starts with 10.5 or more fantasy points, 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games, a ceiling of 19.4 fantasy points. And the overall nice thing with Dowdle is he's gotten a lot of involvement in the passing game. And this is a really interesting Sunday Night Football matchup between the Cowboys and the Niners. 2 teams like kind of in shambles right now. Both teams are going to be hunting for a victory. It's a road game here for the Cowboys, but this Niners defense just does not scare me. They're giving up the 17th most fantasy points to the running back position right now. And they just got gassed by Kareem Hunt in week 7. So I'm not worried about Ezekiel Elliott. Dowdle is the running back to own in terms of the Cowboys. He's the running back to start. He should get involvement in the pass game. He should get enough done on the ground. Can easily score a touchdown in this matchup. Should be a nice competitive game script here. Dowdle has still been very solid for the most part on the season, averaging 11 fantasy points per game. If you own Dowdle, he is a good start this week. You can flex him. You can throw him in as your RB2, but overall, I think he's got plenty of sneaky upside as we move into the week. All right, last player we're going to talk about is Tyler Goodson of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this definitely depends on the health of Jonathan Taylor, who has returned to practice this week, but has been limited dealing with that ankle injury. If Jonathan Taylor plays, then we're not starting Tyler Goodson, although you could see a little bit of involvement even if JT plays. But this is a big divisional matchup this week. Whoever wins this matchup is number one in the AFC South. Yes, the Colts could seriously still take over the Texans. I know plenty of football left this season, but in week 8, they could come out as a number one team, as bad as they've been in their own division. So, of course, pay attention to Jonathan Taylor's health, but if he is out, then Goodson's going to see plenty of involvement. He has been the running back to start in the absence of Jonathan Taylor. I know Trey Sermon did stuff against the Jags. That was the Jags, okay? Even last week against the Dolphins, a bottom 3 run defense, Sermon couldn't do anything. Goodson's been far more consistent, 8.7 or more fantasy points in his last 3 starts in the absence of JT, 10.5 or more in his last 2 starts, and a touchdown this past week, as well as 51 yards on the ground. So the Texans, a stingy run defense overall, but they've allowed 100 or more rushing yards in almost every game to the running back position. They're just not giving up a lot of catches. They're not giving up a lot of total touchdowns to the running back position. So I still think there's definitely opportunity for Goodson this week against the Texans. The upside might be capped, but he sits at just 13% rostered. You need a desperation play. You need someone to throw in last minute. We should, in theory, get a good game script here, as both of these teams are going to be doing whatever they can to come out with a win and come out atop of the division. So if Jonathan Taylor does not play this week, I think Tyler Goodson is in line for plenty of sneaky upside. And that'll do it for today's video. There are 6 sneaky starts as we approach week 8 of the season. Don't forget, guys, I'm answering all fantasy football questions in the comment section down below. If you guys need anything whatsoever as we move into the week, drop me a comment. I'll answer every single comment on this video before Sunday's slate of games. And on top of that, guys, don't forget, we're going to have everything on the channel that you guys could possibly need for week 8 of the season. Start sits at every position, must start defenses, kicker rankings, buy low options, players that you can't bench, last minute waiver options, live fantasy Q&A, everything to help you guys bring home a dub this week. So make sure you guys are checking out all of the content, but more importantly, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out on any of the content. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on The Catch.